Wesley Yin-Poole at IGN has just done an interview with Peter Actopy, the game director for Warzone at Raven, and Etienne Pouliot, the creative director at Verdansk. Apologies if I'm saying any of their names wrong. This interview was really interesting, and I think it pulled back the veil a little bit on what the people who are making Warzone think of the game right now, think of Verdansk and Season 3, and so I wanted to make a video just talking through some of the most interesting points. And before we get going, one interesting point about the interview itself is that it wasn't with Ted Timmins. So Ted Timmins was the creative director at Raven, as far as I know he still is, and he used to be kind of the poster boy for everything Raven did with Warzone. You know, you'd get things that Infinity Ward did, like creating Al Mazrah and DMZ and stuff like that, and they would talk about that. And then everything that Raven did, normally it would be Ted Timmins talking about it. I haven't been involved in a creator calls for the last couple, so I don't know if he's been talking there, but I haven't seen him publicly doing any kind of publicity or presentations about Warzone for a while. And I do wonder why that is. Maybe it's just, oh, his job's changed, maybe he's been promoted, maybe he's just not in a sort of public-facing role right now. But it does make me wonder if maybe they're working on something else. And we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end of the video. So, IGN kick off the interview by asking about Verdansk and the way it's bringing people back to Warzone. And I think nearly everyone's had that kind of experience where people have kind of turned up and suddenly been, hey, I saw Verdansk come back to Warzone, do you want to play a couple of games again? Now, in my experience at least, that's been pretty short-lived. You know, I've known a few people who've been like, oh, I'll give it a try again, and they've played for like one evening and then not played again since. I don't know whether everyone else is having that experience. Maybe let me know in the comments. Have your friendship group come back to Warzone or not? I've definitely been having a lot of fun with it. I've been streaming it every day and I haven't quite got bored of it. I think today was the first day I started feeling a little bit of burnout, that it's like, oh, this is still the same game, just back in Verdansk. You know, I've been here before. But still, I've been having a better time than I did with Urzikstan for sure. But I'd be interested to know how many of the new people are really sticking around. What's interesting, though, is in the interview, the people from Raven and Verdansk do talk about how it seems like that was a focus for the teams, like getting people back in. And they knew bringing back Verdansk would be fun for players who had played it a long time ago and maybe dropped off, as well as for people who have kept on playing it the whole way through. And a part of kind of trying to get these people back into the game who dropped off was bringing the feel of the game back then. So, you know, the changes to time to kill, the changes to audio and stuff like that, as well as making some improvements to the audio and the visuals and stuff to make sure, as they say, it's the best version of Verdansk possible. They go on to talk about how player sentiment's been largely positive. They sort of joke about how Reddit's being positive about the game for once. And it's interesting that they go straight from talking about the success of Season 3 and the Verdansk Resurrection to talking about casual mode and how it is, and I quote, doing really well for us. Now, this is awesome to hear. I'm really glad that casual mode is doing well. I've only played a handful of games of it, and, you know, it's sort of thing where I do get a little bit bored fighting against bots. But I don't think casual mode is really aimed at me, someone who plays Warzone for like 4 or 5 hours a day at the moment. It's aimed at those people who want to come back, want to have those experiences, messing around in Warzone, maybe doing camo grinds, maybe just playing by themselves, or maybe playing with friends who aren't so used to Warzone. And it sounds like it's been awesome for them. And it's really, really cool that I think this seems to have opened the eyes of Raven a little bit to this whole market of, you know, there's probably a lot more people who aren't good at Warzone compared to the number of people who are good at Warzone. So you should probably focus on them a little bit more. And I'm not saying that people who make games should listen to streamers. I think quite the opposite. But I have been saying for years that they should add something like casual mode, where the focus is really on players fighting against bots. And now they've done it and it's a big success. So I'm glad that they've finally done it. Now, it does sound, like I said, that there's a bit more of a focus on kind of returning players. And as a part of that, there's kind of a focus on a broad range of players and doing what they can to help people who aren't that good in the game. So like they talk about how the fast time to kill means even if you're up against someone who's better than you, you've got a chance. You know, if you manage to catch them unawares, if you manage to get off a couple of lucky shots early on, if you have maybe better placement, better positioning, then you've got a chance of beating someone who's a better shot than you, or someone who's using better weapons than you, or something like that. And I think that's really, really cool. They talk about casual mode and they say if they see sweats coming into casual and wrecking the whole server, then they'll have to come up with plans against that. So it really does sound like they're maybe even chasing after these kind of what I think of as more normal players, even if it's maybe slightly at the expense of the most hardcore players. And that, to me, seems like a huge departure from the attitude they had in Caldera onwards, where it really felt like they were hyper-focused on making the game as good as possible for the very best players, you know, the people who are dropping 30, 40, 50 kills in a game, and they were making things like the redeploy drones so people could just keep on chasing bounties and jumping from fight to fight, and they added the nuke quest for the sorts of people that regularly win 5 games in a row, which seems absolutely insane to me. You know, I've managed to do that precisely once, and then we failed the nuke quest, which sucked. And they brought back, you know, buyable gulag tokens so people could be super aggressive the whole time. So for me, this all counts as a good thing. You know, them having more of a focus on normal players, on what I think are probably the vast majority of players, rather than the super vocal hardcore players who are really high skilled and want to be able to dominate absolutely everyone else. I think that's good for the game as a whole. Like I've said a million times, if you have 150 players and you're in solos, one person's going to win, 149 people are going to be disappointed. I think it's better if they try and make the game more fun for those 149 people, rather than just doing everything focused on that one person in each game. But moving on, another interesting section in the interview revolved around the narrative for Warzone. Now, I've talked before about how I think the narrative for Call of Duty in general has always been pretty bad, whether that's the campaign or zombies or Warzone. I've never been impressed by a Call of Duty story, but there did used to be a story for Warzone, and especially in Verdansk, they had the intel and stuff like that. A lot of it was added very late into kind of Verdansk's time period. You know, at the beginning there wasn't really much of anything for this. But there was a story to Warzone, and they used to like try and add on bits to it with the cutscenes and the cinematics each season, things like that. And then they seem to kind of abandon it a little bit with Urzikstan, like we haven't seen much of it in that. And now bringing back Verdansk, there's been no explanation of what happened with the nuke, what happened with the zombies that were taking over Verdansk and all of that kind of thing. They basically state in the interview that they just weren't too fussed about the narrative for Season 3, that they wanted to bring back Verdansk, they wanted to focus on it being kind of a celebration of what Warzone was like 5 years ago and how good it was for people back then. And maybe they'll bring back some elements of the narrative in future. They seem to be kind of hinting that maybe there's something coming. We've already seen stuff about, I think, is it Hudson and coming back and doing some mission or something. Maybe they'll tie that into Warzone and the Verdansk story, who knows. To be honest, I think there's very few people probably who care about the story, so I don't think it's a big concern for them. But an interesting thing in this section is that they do mention that there's some stuff in the map that hints in the story. They say, I don't know if you've seen clips of some things that kind of explain it. And I think they might be alluding to all of those little Easter eggs that are in Verdansk. I did a video about this a few days ago. There's things like the unexploded missile near Stadium, which was meant to be the nuke that destroyed Verdansk, but here it didn't explode. There's some zombies on the coast. There's some vials of Ethereum dotted about. There's a lot of things that are kind of hinting that maybe this is like an alternate reality. Maybe this is a different timeline or something like that. And I think that might be as far as they take it. And then maybe they'll start a new story. They do keep talking about how this is just the beginning of Verdansk 2025. This is the beginning of this version of Warzone. They're not just bringing back the map and then abandoning it. They will be developing it. And we already know that they're going to be adding like the external ascenders in Battle Royale. We're going to be getting some kill streaks back and stuff like that. They're going to be opening the bunkers. We know there's a lot of stuff to come with this version of Verdansk, even just this season, let alone seasons ahead. But then they get onto the most interesting part of the interview, and that's where they start talking about the future of Warzone. Or really, I should say, they don't start talking about the future of Warzone because they seem to be quite cagey about it. So Wesley Impul from IGN asks if Verdansk is here to stay, and they say, yes, we'll keep on building on it and there's more to come. But it's interesting that all through this section, they keep on saying things like, at least for the time being. They seem to be using this kind of language of, for now, Verdansk is our focus. For now, Verdansk is the thing that we want you to be paying attention to. Now, this to me, and I might be reading too much into this, let me know in the comments, but this to me sounds like maybe Verdansk is a bit of a stopgap before whatever they have planned next. I personally think it would make a lot of sense if Verdansk is like tying up the loose ends of Warzone. You know, they started in Verdansk, 5 years later they bring it back to Verdansk, try to correct some of the mistakes, try to leave people with a good impression of Call of Duty Battle Royale, and then move on to whatever's next. Whether that's just another map with Avalon, which at this point I'm kind of hoping it isn't, or something entirely new. Now, I've been saying for a while that I'm really hoping that Raven and Infinity Ward and whichever other companies get involved, you know, hopefully High Moon Studios and Beenox, are really hard at work on the next version of Warzone. Or, even better, that it won't be called Warzone at all, and it will be a new Call of Duty Battle Royale entirely. For me at least, I feel like Warzone's kind of run its course. I can't imagine a world where, no matter how good they make Warzone now, I can't imagine a world where it gets much more popular than it is now. I don't think it's suddenly going to kick off and lots of people who have written off Warzone in the past suddenly turn around and decide to start enjoying it. At the moment, all I see for the future of Warzone is that they'll keep on adding more and more operators and skins and weapons and probably some more maps and stuff like that. And I don't think that's really the answer to making it more successful. Instead, I'm hoping we'll get something based on new technology and they'll start again with a completely fresh slate, like without all of the bloat of the past 5 years. And then they can try some fresh ideas. Like, you know, if Warzone carries on, they'll probably just keep using the same kind of mechanics. Maps will probably be quite similar to maps that we've had before, just like how Urzikstan felt quite similar to other maps that we'd had before, but maybe a blander version of them. Nothing in this interview has made me think that the idea of the next stage of Call of Duty coming is any less likely. Like, nothing in this interview makes it sound like, oh yeah, like this is the future, we're going to be building on this for years to come. It really does sound like, yeah, this is what we're working on now, we hope you enjoy it, and we can't talk about the future yet. Especially, like I said at the beginning of this video, the fact that Ted Timmons hasn't been about for a while doing presentations and stuff makes me think maybe he's working on something that we haven't heard about yet. Maybe the next evolution of Call of Duty is something that's been worked on for a few years at this point, which would explain why kind of Raven didn't seem to be doing much with Warzone for the last year or two. Maybe the next step of it is coming and they've been working on it for years and it's going to blow all of our minds. I know we're not meant to be getting like the next Infinity Ward Call of Duty for a while now. It seems like, you know, they're breaking that cycle a little bit. And I'm hoping that's because it's something different. You know, it's a proper leap forwards. It's a proper change. But I don't think that necessarily means that we'd have to wait for the next Warzone. Lots of people seem to be saying recently, and I completely agree, that Warzone should just completely detach from Call of Duty in general, that it shouldn't be tied to the annual multiplayer and campaign releases. They should be able to do their own thing. And why not kind of introduce new technology, introduce a new engine and stuff like that with a new Call of Duty Battle Royale? Whether they call that, I mean, people will want to call it Warzone 4, I've seen on Twitter and stuff like that, but technically it would be Warzone 3. Like when Modern Warfare 3 came out, we were told at COD Next, absolutely do not call it Warzone 3. You know, there was Warzone, there was Warzone 2, now we just call it Warzone. And although lots of people did call it Warzone 3, that's kind of left Call of Duty with a bit of a problem. That if they brought out Warzone 4, that's confusing. And if they bring out Warzone 3, people will be like, oh, aren't we already playing Warzone 3? So that would be confusing. So I think just scrap the idea of Warzone and call it, you know, Call of Duty Battle Royale. That's a fine name. I don't have any problems with that. Or change it. So instead of war, they could use like battle. Instead of zone, they could use field. Oh no, wait, they can't do that. But I'm sure they could think of something else and just say, okay, Warzone is gonna carry on, there'll be legacy servers and stuff like that for all the people that care loads about the skins they paid for and all of the cosmetics and all of that kind of stuff. But we're starting a brand new mode and this is where we want your focus to be. I really don't think it's worth them pandering too much to the people who have spent loads of money on skins and cosmetics, and some of you might feel differently, especially if you're the sort of people that have spent lots of money on it. But I don't think there was ever an agreement that everything you bought would be able to be used forever. I think it's kind of, you know, with Warzone 1, we had that time where, yep, any skins you bought for Warzone 1, you couldn't use them after Warzone 1 ended, and we moved to Warzone 2. I feel like they could just do that again and say, yep, you can carry on playing Warzone 2 for a while, although the whole Warzone Caldera thing, they did shut that down remarkably quickly. But yeah, they could say, okay, with Warzone, you can carry on playing with the stuff you've bought if you want to, but we're going to be over here having fun with the brand new thing, and you can buy new skins for that one. That way they wouldn't be held back by sort of having to make sure all of the operators fit a new animation system or new voice lines or new taunts and stuff like that. Like, it must be a nightmare if they want to change something dramatically about Warzone now. Think about it, like if they wanted to add a big new feature to it and the characters needed voice lines specific to it, are they going to go back to Snoop Dogg and be like, hey, can you record some more lines for this? What about like Tim the Tatman and Nick Merckx? Are they going to go to them and say like, hey, can you record some new voice lines so that your operators work with this new version? Like, that just doesn't make any sense. I think they need a fresh start. And I know I've kind of gone on a bit of a tangent away from this interview, but this really was my takeaway from the interview, was that yes, they're paying more attention to normal players. That's absolutely awesome. Yes, Verdansk seems to have been a success. Casual mode seems to have been a success. That's absolutely awesome. But I think there's something big coming quite soon. And I realise I've been saying that for like a year and a half at this point, but honestly, I really do think there's something big coming soon.
All stations, no enemy movement detected at this time.